Arthur stood before Tessia, who had transformed into a terrifying creature. The creeping vegetation formed a huge coil around her, as if enclosing the entire area with a strong grip. Beside Tessia, Grandpa Varian looked extremely worried, his face reflecting deep anxiety over his grandson's condition. When Arthur arrived, the coils of vegetation surrounding Tessia immediately attacked her. The plant was caught, a creature known for its ability to creep and coil with terrifying force. Grandfather Varian, with a worried look, explained that Tessia had changed after returning from the dungeon. He wasn't exactly sure what happened, but it seemed that Beast Militessa rebelled and caused problems with her assimilation process. The creature was trying to fight back against Tessia's body. Arthur felt that there was something very unusual about the Elderwood Guard he was dealing with. Even though they had been together for a long time, it still felt uncomfortable, as if a mutation had occurred in the creature. A feeling of guilt swept over Arthur, who felt he shouldn't have given him the beast core. The ring on Arthur's hand suddenly glowed brightly, forcing Sylvie, who was on top of Arthur's head, to jump down. Sylvie, seeing how much pain Arthur was in, panicked and pointed out that Arthur's lock was already scratched and bleeding. The battle between Arthur and the wild plant's coils intensified. The plant grew in size and length, exerting terrible force against Arthur. Arthur shouted to Sylvie to go with Varian. Varian, who was standing to the side, felt like Grandpa Varian's grandson had a grudge against him. However, Grandpa Varian still looked worried and felt that joking was not the right thing to do in this situation. Sylvie, in a state of panic, asked Arthur about his next move. Arthur, who was fighting tenaciously, ordered Sylvie to be with Varian, hoping that by cutting him off, the matter could be resolved. Arthur decided to use a small orb he found in an old shop. The orb flew with surprising power against the wild plants wrapped around Tessia. The little ball was very powerful, and in an instant, Tessia returned to her original form. Arthur quickly caught Tessia and placed her carefully on the ground. Tessia was unconscious, and Varian rushed over to the two of them. Varian was grateful for Arthur's actions, which had saved Tessia. Tessia began to regain consciousness, slowly opening her eyes and puzzling over her surroundings. When her vision cleared and she saw Varian and Arthur, Tessia immediately got up and hugged Arthur tightly. Grandpa Varian, who was standing ready to welcome his grandson, was saddened that Tessia chose to hug Arthur instead of him. In a tone full of sadness, Grandpa Varian said that Tessia was hugging the wrong person. However, Tessia paid no attention to her grandfather's words and only focused on Arthur, expressing her happiness that Arthur was still alive. Arthur returned Tessia's hug and replied that he was indeed alive. Tessia was taken to the medical room quickly, accompanied by Arthur and Grandpa Varian. Arthur still didn't understand why the orb given by the old man only flew towards Tessia. Although it seemed to calm Tessia down, Arthur wasn't sure if it was really effective. He kept thinking about the need to go back to the shop and ask what exactly he had been given. Suddenly, a man from the medical team approached Grandpa Varian and called out to him in a formal tone. Grandpa Varian immediately approached the doctor attending to his grandson and asked with great concern about Tessia's condition. The doctor, who was examining Tessia's condition, explained that they were checking the mana cycle in Tessia's body. However, there was one strange thing. Tessia's mana core appeared to be bright orange in color, something they had never seen before. The doctor wondered if there was something wrong with the mana nucleus. The doctor continued his explanation in a matter-of-fact tone. He explained that although he was a mage with dark yellow abilities, he had difficulty in accurately measuring Tessia's mana core. There was no significant problem, but the inability to measure precisely caused concern. Grandpa Varian, hearing the explanation, was dissatisfied and emphasized his desire to check for himself. Firmly, he stated that he could not accept the explanation at face value and wanted to check it out in person. Arthur, still filled with anxiety, asked about Tessia's core and the problem. Grandfather Varian after conducting an in-depth examination, seemed very surprised by the discovery. He revealed that Teshio was much better now, but Teshio's mana core had almost reached the first silver stage, which was very unusual. Arthur grew anxious and asked what this meant and what the next step should be. Varian explained that Teshio needed further rest and recovery. They needed to continue monitoring the changes and ensure there were no further problems with Teshio's mana core. Arthur nodded, trying to understand the situation, and expressed his willingness to follow instructions and continue monitoring Teshio's condition. Arthur and Grandpa Varian stepped slowly out of Teshio's infirmary. Grandfather Varian looked calm, while Arthur's face was filled with worry. Arthur kept asking about Teshio's condition and which core was about to enter the silver stage. Grandpa Varian explained that although Teshio was showing rapid and unusual progress, this was not something to be overly concerned about. Teshio was in the process of recovering and, once conscious, would be brought back to the palace for further rest. Arthur nodded, although the look on his face still showed concern. He thanked them for the explanation, but still had questions about the lance. Arthur wanted to know how strong they really were. Varian explained that the lance were mages with white mana cores and were very powerful. It takes about 20 mages with a white mana core to be able to withstand one mage with a silver mana core. Varian explained that the white mana core was one of the most powerful under the silver stage, and each level of mana core reflected different magical powers and capacities. Arthur felt more understanding after the explanation and felt calmer. He thanked Grandpa Varian for the explanation and felt more prepared for the upcoming challenges. Grandpa Varian explained that the lances, although very powerful, did not use their power to seize power as they adhered to their code of conduct and responsibility. Their strength is a result of training and combat experience, not from the intention of seizing power. Arthur understood that information regarding the lances and their relationship with the royal family was highly confidential and not expected to be shared with others. They continued their journey with a better understanding of the complexities of the magical world and the power of the lances, as well as their relationship with the royal family. Arthur sat listening as Varian Aerolith told his story. Grandfather Varian began his explanation gently but meaningfully, inviting Arthur to understand a long-forgotten history. Varian told a story that seemed to take Arthur back in time, long before their time. Varian explained about the ancient races elves, humans, and dwarves, who lived as nomads back then. They traveled alone, meeting other races only to exchange goods, each bringing their own culture and traditions. On the walls of the royal chambers, pictures switched to show travelers of different races meeting in small markets, conducting careful transactions. The obvious tension in their eyes suggests that their relationship is not entirely harmonious. Despite the potential to live in peace, a great threat always haunts them. Beasts roam freely and target them as prey. A horrifying scene appeared in the next picture, depicting mana beasts attacking villages and settlements of different races. The suffering experienced by all races is very evident. Every year, the number of members of the three races decreased significantly, until one day, a god descended from the sky to end their suffering. A large image showed the god shining with divine light, standing before three great rulers, King Glader of the humans, King Graysunders of the elves, and King Aerolith of the dwarves. The god's majesty was striking, as if the entire world bowed before him. The god gave 6 artifacts to the 3 kings, dividing the artifacts between them. These artifacts provided the knowledge and insight to utilize mana in the most powerful way, under the oath and ceremony of a knight. The next image shows the 3 kings receiving the artifacts with their hands, performing a grand ceremony before their followers. The kings then asked the 6 artifact users to spread their new knowledge and power to anyone who was able. Thus, the first generation united to push the mana beasts into the troughs now known as the Beast Glades. The final image depicts elves, humans, and dwarves working together with strong determination to hold back the mana beasts. The dark skies began to lighten, and peace began to materialize on Earth. The three races began to live in peace after the victory. The human king led his people westward, to a land that was fertile and suitable for farming. The elf king headed north, to a magical forest filled with beauty and wonder. The dwarf king led his people south, to a land rich in precious metals and gems. The final image shows all three races living in harmony in the places they have chosen, each creating a civilization that suits their culture and beliefs. Grandfather Varian emphasized that this was the origin of their current peace. It all started with collaboration and God-given knowledge, a legacy that should be cherished and preserved. Arthur pondered Grandfather Varian's explanation, feeling that there was much to learn from their past and the importance of maintaining the peace that had been created. Varian reiterated that their duty now was to preserve and honor the legacy that their ancestors had left behind. However, Varian also explained that the peace only lasted a few generations. The three races slowly forgot about their alliance, and greed began to take hold of them. This led to a split that gave birth to various conflicts in the future. With a deeper understanding of their history and heritage, Arthur was ready to face the challenges and continue his duties with full responsibility. Varian continued in a more serious tone. The lances, it turns out, have not gone away. They have remained in every generation, very close to the royal family, and have been secretly resurrected to use their respective artifacts. When the new continent was discovered, the decision was made to publicize the lances. Arthur began to understand the situation described, realizing the reason why all of this had to be kept secret. If the information regarding the item that could make the mana core white leaked out, then Decathlon would be destroyed from within. Grandpa Varian placed his hand on Arthur's shoulder affectionately, signaling the changes in Arthur. Arthur's body and brain had grown up since the first time they met. Varian stroked Arthur's head gently, emphasizing that Arthur was now part of this story. With this explanation, Arthur felt a deeper connection to the past. Varian explained that Arthur's bond was not only with the mana beast, but also with the god. Arthur looks at Sylvie, who is asleep on the bench, doubting whether Sylvie is the god in question. Varian stated that in the religious books, they were humans who were able to enter their minds and play their bodies up to their mana. Varian also added that that was the reason why dragons were considered a blessing in their culture, and why the truth about Sylvie had to be kept a secret. Puzzled, Arthur tried to understand the explanation. He felt that the bond was not a coincidence, and that the world had changed. Varian emphasized the importance of being prepared for an uncertain future. Arthur and Sylvie then walked down the street, the quiet of the night enveloping them. Arthur seemed busy thinking about Varian's words about his connection to the god. Occasionally, his gaze would wander into the distance, pondering the meaning of all the information he had just received. Sylvie, who walked beside him, broke the silence. They finally arrived at a building with high, solid walls. Arthur scanned the surroundings and suddenly felt something rolling near his feet. He looked down and saw that the orb he had been given had fallen on the floor. Arthur tried to pick it up and found a paper hidden under the orb. Arthur and Sylvie looked at each other in confusion. They decided to take the paper back to the Lewin's house to examine it further. At the Lewin home, a warm atmosphere greeted Arthur and Sylvie. Arthur seemed a little uneasy, his mind still focused on the paper they had just found. The reporter noticed Arthur's agitation and approached him with a worried tone. Alice Lewin, who was busy preparing the food on the dining table, smiled happily, happy that Arthur was back and could enjoy dinner. Ellie, glancing at Sylvie, who was enjoying the meal curiously, wondered about Sylvie's presence. Reynolds Lewin, sitting at the end of the table, added in a reflective tone, suggesting that Arthur should do whatever he had in mind and not just focus on work. Eiley, in a slightly lazy manner, expressed the hope that Arthur would be safe. Alice Lewin then softly says that a gift for Sylvie might make her happy. After dinner, Arthur and Sylvie leave the house and continue their journey. Outside the house, Arthur examines the paper they found. It said that if they wanted to know the full story, They should come to the West Gate tomorrow morning. Arthur looked at Sylvie with deep curiosity. With determination and curiosity, they stepped towards their next destination, ready for whatever they would encounter. Arthur walked slowly along the road, his mind still focused on the paper he had just found. Suddenly, his memory brought back a vivid image, a kingdom ruled by the Gray King. In the vision, there were 3 people talking seriously, requesting that someone be killed. They were talking about keeping the country stable and showing the people that the Gray King was a leader who would fight for them, as well as showing that their threats were no joke. Arthur felt a sharp headache as the memory flashed vividly in his mind. He held his head, trying to calm the sudden dizziness. Sylvie, who was walking beside him, felt worried seeing Arthur's expression. He tried to smile and stroked Sylvie's fur gently, trying to calm himself down. Inwardly, Arthur wondered why these memories were surfacing now. He looked back at the paper found under the orb and thought about the previous conversation with the shopkeeper's old grandfather and Varian's grandfather. Arthur recalled that the old man seemed to know something that Varian's grandfather didn't mention. However, he convinced himself that Varian's grandfather could not have lied about this. With a serious look, Arthur gazed up at the clear sky, feeling more and more confused about the situation he was facing. Arthur decided to search for more answers, feeling that there was something bigger than meets the eye. With renewed determination, he resumed his steps, ready to unravel the mystery hidden behind the found note and what the old man really knew. Arthur and Sylvie stepped into the portal at the West Gate, located at the end of the street. In front of the portal, a guard stood at attention, checking each person who wished to enter. As they approached, the guard asked for verification to enter the portal. Arthur looked confused by the verification request. The guard explained that this was the Western Gate portal to the Kingdom of Eleanor, and they needed verification to allow everyone through. Arthur thought for a moment, wondering why Eleanor, then showed the guard something. When the guard saw the seal of the Eleanor royal family in Arthur's hand, his face showed deep surprise. Inwardly, the guard muttered that Arthur had the seal of the Eleanor royal family, and wondered who this kid really was. The guard then bowed slightly respectfully, apologized for the inconvenience, and allowed Arthur and Sylvie to pass. Arthur thanked him and stepped through the portal with Sylvie. As soon as they crossed the gate, a bright light greeted them, and Arthur felt a strange sensation enveloping his body. When the light subsided, Arthur and Sylvie arrived in a very dark place. Arthur asked Sylvie to hold on, while he tried to understand what was happening. Sylvie, who was above Arthur's head, showed fear. Arthur lit a fire from his hand to provide light, wondering what was going on in the place. Suddenly, a purple glowing eye appeared in the darkness. Arthur, curiously, asked who was there. Arthur's eyes rounded in shock, while Sylvie closed her eyes in fear. They felt a little calmer as they had the privacy to communicate. Arthur hugged Sylvie tightly to provide a sense of security. In an instant, the black cat previously seen in the old man's shop appeared before them. The black cat then transformed into a person. The person said in a wise tone that he came to bring wisdom to people like Arthur. He identified himself as one of the gods. Arthur and Sylvie looked at each other, still shocked by what they had just encountered. Arthur, with deep curiosity, prepared to hear more about who exactly the person before him was and what they would reveal. Inside the Cyrus Academy building, Director Goodsky walked with quick steps towards the boardroom. As he was about to enter the room, the sounds of intense discussion could be heard from within. Director Goodsky paused for a moment and listened to the ongoing conversation. Inside the boardroom, Director Cynthia Goodsky had arrived and was discussing with the board members about Lance Alia's death. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Muriel Erelith, one of the board members, shows her anxiety about the current situation. She asked questions about what the student who found Alia's body might be hiding. Darka-san, in an angry tone, requested that the student be brought in for questioning. Priscilla, another council member, doubts the effectiveness of such an action, given that Cynthia has already integrated and headed to the scene. Alduin Aerolith then suggested sending the best tracking mage to search for any evidence left behind, and asked Cynthia Goodsky if she could join them. Cynthia replied regretfully, informing that she had urgent business to attend to. Dawsid Graysunders, who heard Cynthia's explanation, expressed his curiosity about Cynthia's urgent business. However, Mariel Iralith interrupted the conversation and stated that Cynthia had provided enough help to the council, suggesting that Cynthia should leave immediately as Skyrus Academy definitely needed her presence. Cynthia, respectfully, left the council room, which was still busy discussing the next step. After exiting the council room, Cynthia Goodsky walked quickly, followed by her pet bird, Avier. Cynthia, as she continued walking, thought about her concerns about not telling the council that Arthur Lewin was the student who found Alia. Avier responded to Cynthia's concerns, pointing out that the boy was indeed mysterious, and it was not good for the council to suspect him. However, unexpectedly, several figures emerged from the darkness and attacked Cynthia. Cynthia soon realized that they were not just one group, but several clusters ready to attack her. Quickly, Cynthia ordered Avier to deal with the attack. Avier carried out Cynthia's orders quickly and efficiently. One of the severely wounded attackers then expressed interest and threats regarding the state of the continent, confirming that the war was about to begin. Cynthia, not waiting long, ended the attacker's life with a fatal blow and was exhausted afterwards. Cynthia expressed her gratitude to Avier for cleaning up the mess, though Avier also reminded her of the wound on Cynthia's back. Cynthia examined the red and sore wound, admitting that she was in pain but still determined to continue the journey. She took out a potion from her bag and gave it to Avier to treat her wounds. Avier, carefully, treated Cynthia's wounds and emphasized the importance of staying alert and finding out more about the threat. Cynthia agreed with Avier's statement and directed their journey towards the beach to look for further clues. They continued their journey determined to uncover the truth and protect the continent from the lurking danger. Arthur stood before Winsome, a being who claimed to be a god. The room was filled with a soft light emanating from Winsome's aura, creating an atmosphere that combined fear and curiosity in Arthur. He reflected on the journey that brought him here, from the death of Lance Alia to the mysterious orb given to him by an old man. Winsome, with his majestic appearance and powerful aura, looked at Arthur with a calm and dignified demeanor. Arthur realized that this being was far more powerful than any white core mage he had ever faced. Although the feeling of awe almost overcame him, Arthur tried to keep his composure, realizing that this was not the time to show surprise. Before continuing, Arthur felt the need to clarify a few things. The gatekeeper had told him that this portal led to Eleanor, where Tessia and Virion were. He wanted to know if all this had anything to do with the orb given to him by Winsome. Winsome raised his hand, emitting a soft light that displayed the images of Tessia and Virion. He says that he just wants to make sure that Arthur is the boy who came through the portal. Winsome added that Tessia and Virion were doing well, and that thanks to the pearl elixir Arthur had given them, Tessia's condition had improved. The elixir is keeping the cores from exploding. Winsome also reminded Arthur to take good care of the other orb, as it was for himself. Arthur was surprised to hear the word explode, but he tried to contain his emotions. He continued to listen to Winsome, who explained the reason why Arthur had been brought here. Winsome reveals that Arthur is currently a citizen of Cathan, and mentions that Cathan is not the only continent on the planet. Those who have always protected Cathan and Alakria are from the land of Lotus. Arthur began to associate this information with his memories of Ephiotis and Alakria, sensing that there was something bigger behind all of this. Winsome confirmed that they were gods who gave artifacts to learn magic. However, the knowledge of the artifacts came from stories told by the old Elven king, and no one in Arthur's world knew about Azura. Winsome went on to explain that Azura had always been governed by some kind of noble obligation and had never directly disturbed the people of Arthur's world, unless the peace or balance of the world was threatened. However, this rule had been broken. Ephiodus was once divided into 3 groups of parts, consisting of several different racial blood clans. Arthur realized the complexity and depth of the conflict he had to face, looking at the clan symbols Winsome showed him. Winsome explained that the powerful in each group had their own priorities, but all adhered to the principle of not looking down on the lesser races. However, after Akrona became the new leader Agrona, that belief was only used to advance her people. Arthur pondered those words, trying to connect them to his earlier conversation with Vritra. Winsome revealed that Clan Vritra was an anomaly among the Azura, considering themselves to be scientists who were constantly studying and expanding their knowledge of how mana worked. When Agrona came to power, Vritra's power grew by leaps and bounds. Agrona and his clan members had conducted experiments using the bodies of the lower-class races in Alakria, finding various ways to enhance their own abilities. Arthur was worried and expressed his confusion about what all this had to do with him. Winsome explains that if Arthur is right, it should have nothing to do with him. However, Arthur must realize the connection with them. The light from Winsome's hand forms an image of Sylvie in the form of a black dragon, revealing the true form of the creature that has been with her. Winsome states that they have been searching for Miss Sylvie for years. After finding traces of her, they encountered a small child carrying deities. Arthur was surprised to hear these words and asked about the veracity of the information received earlier. Winsome confirmed that Arthur was currently bound to my lord's only daughter, the granddaughter of the most powerful being on all 3 continents of this world. Arthur stared at Sylvie in amazement and asked if it was true that Sylvie was a deity and was among the most powerful alongside Sylvia's grandmother. Winsome confirmed that based on their bloodlines and potential, it was true. Most deities had 3 forms, but Miss Sylvie seemed to be in the form of a small animal to conserve her energy. Most Azuras tended to remain in their human form to conserve mana. Arthur was surprised to learn that Sylvie could transform into a human. He asked if Sylvie could also turn into a human. Winsome explained that if Sylvie had not transformed into her human form until now, perhaps she could not transform. Given the recent developments, they have found signs that Agrona's spies are already on this continent. There would be a war to come. Although Exelon did not know Ephiodus because of his arrogance, Arthur's relationship with Lady Sylvia could play an important role in this situation. Arthur pondered, feeling heavy with the decision he had to make. He stood before Winsome, a being who claimed to be a god. In a room filled with the soft glow of Winsome's aura, Arthur felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. All the events that had brought him here, from the death of Lance Alia to the mysterious orb given to him by his old grandfather, rotated in his mind. Winsome, with his majestic appearance and powerful aura, looked at Arthur with a calm and authoritative demeanor. Arthur knew full well that this being was far more powerful than any white core mage he had ever faced. Nonetheless, he tried to calm himself, understanding that this was not the time to show admiration. Winsome explained that if Arthur did not help them, Sylvie might be taken away. This role would involve the continent as well as Arthur's family and friends. Winsome promised to be Arthur's ally and expressed his admiration for the wisdom and development of Arthur's core. However, to harness the potential within Arthur, they need to go to Ephiodus, a place where Arthur and Sylvie can learn and grow stronger. Sylvie's power, which can even kill Azura, lies within Arthur, and Ephiodus is the only place where they can utilize it. Thus, Cathan would have a chance to fight the witch from Alakria. Arthur nodded, realizing that this decision was an important step for their future and the future of their continent. Meanwhile, in the meeting room of the disciplinary committee, a tense atmosphere enveloped the members. The conference table was littered with important documents and notes, while stern faces signaled the seriousness of the situation they were facing. Cathan looked anxious, thinking about the events of the past 2 days. Cathan, with a tight mouth and a troubled expression, expressed her worries. It had only been 2 days since Claire and Curtis had returned from their field trip, and the problems on campus had intensified. Claire explained that Benton was beaten and tied to a statue outside the building because of his status as a plebeian and an elf. They needed to stop this act immediately before it developed into something worse. Kathleen looked over at Curtis, who seemed agitated. Curtis had not spoken to anyone since telling her about the events in the dungeon, and Kathleen wondered why Claire and Curtis had left Arthur alone. Doradria broached the subject of their search, pointing out that the professors wouldn't help without solid evidence. Kai adds that he is only aware of a few people wandering around campus, but nothing suspicious. Theo gets angry and bangs the table, complaining about the disciplinary committee's inability to do anything about it. Kara sighs heavily and waits for Director Goodsky's return. Harith added his distrust of actions taken simply out of dissatisfaction with the school's progress, while Katham grew angry and argued that Arthur would know what to do. Curtis seriously said that they couldn't involve Arthur in this, but Kathleen was sure that Arthur would be back soon, and they should prepare everything. Suddenly, the boardroom door opened with a bang. Elijah, looking tense, entered the room. Claire asked if Elijah was Arthur's friend, and Elijah nodded his head in response. Kathleen looked at Elijah attentively, sensing the tension he was feeling. Elijah sighed and revealed that he had important news regarding Arthur. He expressed his anxiety and stated that he was glad everyone was here. However, before Elijah could finish his sentence, an explosion shook the meeting room, followed by a tremor that made everyone panic and run outside. Kathleen, while running, remembered her mother's teachings about social equality and the importance of not hating someone for something that cannot be changed. In her mind, she went back to her childhood, when her mother rebuked her for refusing to mix with children from different social classes. Her mother taught her that no matter one's status, everyone has their own privileges, and one should not hate someone for something they cannot change. Kathleen reflected with respect towards her mother, remembering how thoughtful and caring her mother was towards everyone. Her mother taught her to prevent any form of discrimination. Kathleen also recalled her mother's efforts to build the 3 Unions Hall on campus as a symbol of peace and alliance between the 3 races. However, looking at the current state of affairs, Kathleen felt that the symbol no longer reflected the expected values. The flames devoured Cyrus Academy with devastating force, spreading chaos throughout the academy complex. The magnificent and well-organized buildings were now covered by tongues of flame that devoured everything mercilessly. The sound of screams and cries of fear filled the air, creating an atmosphere of chaos. Students and staff ran around in panic, trying to put out the flames and save themselves from the spreading flames. In the midst of the chaos, Charles stood with an angry expression. His normally calm face now looked filled with anger and frustration. His erect body and contorted facial expression signaled the depth of his anger. He felt extremely burdened by this situation. He expressed his anger by shouting, blaming the disciplinary committee's actions for suddenly pulling him from class for no apparent reason. Every word she uttered seemed to be filled with deep anger, fighting against the injustice she felt. Theo, a member of the disciplinary committee, stood near Charles with a cold and skeptical attitude. He considered that the accusations made by Charles were an attempt to play drama in the midst of a critical situation. In a sharp tone, Theo showed disbelief in Charles' innocence, given Charles' presence at the scene. He felt that the accusation was an unfounded form of self-defense. A male professor standing near Theo looked very angry. His strapping posture and stern facial expression showed how frustrated he was with the situation. He felt that the disciplinary committee's actions were unfair. In his opinion, accusations without solid evidence would only make things worse. He felt that random accusations without any clear basis were unacceptable, especially in a situation that was already very bad. Professor Glory, who had just arrived at the scene of the fire, joined in the chaos. Her sudden presence adds dynamics to an already heated situation. Professor Glory has an authoritative and powerful aura, and her presence provides a sense of calm amidst the tension. She emphasized that stress and tension cannot be used as an excuse to make accusations without sufficient evidence. Professor Glory asked everyone to stay away from the scene of the fire so as not to add to the chaos. The students who witnessed this event began to talk about the disciplinary committee's actions with resentment. They felt that accusations without evidence would only add to the uncertainty and make things worse. They felt that the disciplinary committee's decision to make accusations without a clear basis would only add to the chaos in the midst of an already severe crisis. Theo, who was still angry, tried to calm himself down with the help of Curtis. Curtis, as Theo's close friend, looks anxious but still tries to calm the situation. Theo felt the need to quickly find Professor Glory and take care of the matter while making sure no one else was left inside the burning building. Curtis tries to calm Theo down, assuring him that everything will be safe and advising him not to let his anger get the better of him. As Theo and Curtis leave to handle the situation, Charles is seen smiling wryly. The smile adds to the tension among the committee members, suggesting that the situation is getting more complicated and intriguing. Charles' smile seemed to indicate satisfaction or perhaps triumph over the worsening situation, adding complexity to the dynamic. On the other side of Cyrus Academy, Elijah practiced alone in a deserted practice room. The room was usually a place to practice and hone magical skills, but right now the atmosphere was far from calm. Although the room was well maintained, the tension caused by the fire that engulfed the academy outside was having a profound psychological impact. Elijah found it difficult to concentrate as the situation plagued his mind. Elijah practiced with frustration, feeling dissatisfied with his own abilities. Although his abilities were already quite strong, he felt that his control over his magic power was still weak. He felt the need to get help to hone his skills, especially involving Arthur, whom he considered very important. Elijah thought about how much he hoped Arthur would be able to help him train and improve his shortcomings. Determined, Elijah activated his technique, focusing energy on the elemental quadrant. He attempted to control the energy appropriately, hoping to correct his perceived lack of control. He mused that Arthur's presence might be helpful in dealing with the fires burning in the academy. The thought of Arthur's great abilities gave Elijah additional encouragement to continue practicing. Memories of previous conversations with members of the disciplinary committee filled his mind. During the conversation, they were grateful that Arthur had survived the dangerous dungeon. They agreed that they should release all these beliefs before Arthur returned so that Arthur could rest in peace. This memory increased Elijah's gratitude for Arthur's safety and strengthened his resolve to be better. Elijah was relieved that Arthur, although careless, could not have died from a fall. This reflects the depth of Elijah's gratitude for Arthur's friendship and support. He recalls the moments when Arthur always helped him and provided meaningful encouragement. Elijah felt that even though people might know about Arthur's true strength, they would still feel worried because Arthur was very popular and had many people who cared about him. Elijah realized that the attention and support for Arthur came from many different circles, including the disciplinary committee and Princess Tessia. Elijah felt uneasy and a little jealous of the attention Arthur was receiving. He felt that the attention and support given to Arthur was far greater than what he received. His head throbbed with pain from the emotional and physical strain, and he held his head in his hands. However, as he thought back to the good memories with Arthur and the friendship that had been forged, a gentle smile appeared on his face. It provided the impetus to convince him that he needed to stay focused on his goal. With renewed vigor, Elijah strengthened his resolve to become stronger. He realized that Arthur was facing a big battle and wanted to be by his side to support him. To achieve this goal, he had to become stronger and not let jealousy get the better of him. With strong conviction and motivation, Elijah commits to continue training and developing his skills, ready to face any challenges that may come in the future to support Arthur and himself. The portal that emitted a soft light brought Arthur to a busy place. They entered a city that never seemed to sleep, where a hustle and bustle filled the air. Around them, rapid footsteps, conversations, and scattered items created a dizzying bustle. Near the entrance of the city, Roger, a large man with an irritated expression, stood looking at the watch in his hand. His face reflected frustration and dwindling patience. A man beside him tried to provide some optimism by saying that they should be able to settle their affairs that day. The other man added that the formation of a new council could open up opportunities for business to resume in the city. Arthur, who was walking side by side with a woman who seemed to hold an important role, felt the tension as they approached the entrance to the city. When Roger saw them, he immediately stopped his steps and called out to Arthur in an angry tone. Arthur stopped and looked at Roger in confusion, not understanding what made the man so upset. Roger turned his gaze to Arthur, his face full of anger. He sternly reminded Arthur about the long queue to enter the city, as if blaming Arthur for not following the rules. The woman beside Arthur tried to explain that Arthur had important business. However, Roger ignored the explanation, and even the man beside Roger tried to calm the escalating situation. Roger, still impatient, continued his tirade, accusing Arthur of jumping the queue for no apparent reason. Arthur, remaining calm under pressure, explained that there was a valid reason behind his actions. However, Roger grew angrier and threatened to burn Arthur alive if necessary, clearly showing his impatience. In a swift move, Roger used his fire magic power to lift Arthur's body. Despite the tense situation, Arthur showed courage and showed no fear. Arthur, with swiftness and skill, fought back against Roger. With his mango skills, Arthur managed to knock Roger to the ground, impressing everyone around him and leaving them in awe before finally moving on with Arthur. After the situation with Roger was resolved, Arthur asked about the delay in finding Sylvie, reminding him that Beast Will was supposed to carry a trail of Sylvie's mana. Winsome, who was now standing in front of Arthur, explained that hiding the bond mark with one of Lady Sylvia's furs also meant hiding the presence of her trail. Arthur recalled that he had indeed done this. Winsome then informed him that they had finally found Arthur and that the time to prepare to enter Ephesus had come. Arthur then entered the borders of Ephesus and was confronted by two soldiers guarding the entrance to the city. One of the guards greeted them politely, asking who they were talking to. The woman he was with bowed respectfully, while Arthur showed a badge to verify their plans. Arthur watched the reaction of the guards, who looked doubtful and was frustrated by their skepticism towards the badge. Inwardly, Arthur wondered about the meaning of having a badge if no one believed it was real. Finally, the guards allowed them to enter. However, before they could go any further, a mysterious force suddenly absorbed them. Despite having to use magic to defend themselves, they managed to survive the attack. The mysterious force turned out to be Virion, who appeared with a surprising appearance. Arthur was surprised to see him, and was happy to see Virion again. However, tensions rise as Arthur asks what happened and whether Virion infiltrated the city. Virion, in a serious tone, explains that the damage caused is not just the result of infiltration. Suddenly, a girl appears and calls Virion grandfather. The girl was Tessia, who seemed to be struggling with the difficulty of fully controlling her body. Virion took stock of the situation and explained that Tessia's body was already fully integrated with Beast Will guardian Wolderwood. The explanation added to the complexity of the situation, leaving Arthur and his group with more questions about what would happen next. Arthur was surprised to hear that Tessia had been fully integrated with the S-class beast. In his mind, he began to doubt the possibility of a connection to the marbles from Winsome. Arthur and Virion stood in the middle of a crowd of guards who were busy clearing the area around the entrance to the city of Ephesus. Virion looked at Arthur with a thoughtful gaze, then gave him stern instructions. Although Virion was awake and conscious, Tessia was unable to control his vines, which continued to mutate with every stem cut. Virion asked Arthur to prepare to continue the journey while protecting him from behind. A bodyguard wearing shimmering armor approached Virion and asked if any help was needed. Varian replied in the affirmative, asking the bodyguard to stay away from the area and make sure no one else approached. Although the guards were confused, they followed Varian's orders and left the area immediately. Varian looked back at Arthur and said that the fewer people who knew about Teshia's situation, the better. Arthur was asked to continue on his way, and before he could move, Sylvie approached with a worried look on her face. Sylvie asks if she should come along. Arthur gave her a gentle smile and said that they didn't want to scare the palace staff with a dragon in the situation. He promised to call Sylvie if there was a problem. Sylvie nodded and moved away from the crowd carefully. Meanwhile, Varian remained vigilant, ensuring that there was no outside interference. Arthur, now ready to continue his journey into Ephesus, prepared himself for the challenges ahead. Arthur stepped carefully into an area filled with vicious vines. The darkness that covered the place made it difficult to see, while the pungent stench of decay added to the eerie atmosphere. In the midst of the chaos, Arthur saw Varian standing firm, watching the plants that continued to grow with menacing force. Arthur watched the plants closely. The stems of the plants that were constantly growing and spreading threatened with wild movements. Arthur knew that using fire spells in this area would be extremely risky, as it could not only harm the surroundings, but could also ruin their chances of saving Teshia. With great concentration, Arthur utilized the magic of his mana to cut and remove the trunks that stood in his way. Every move was done carefully, to ensure that the trunks did not cause further damage to the environment or injure the struggling Teshia. After some time of trying, Arthur began to succeed in overcoming the trunks blocking his path. He finally saw the exhausted figure of Teshia, struggling amidst the menacing vines. Teshia's body was surrounded by ever-moving stems, making it difficult for her to hold on. Teshia looked at Arthur with hope and exhaustion. With a gasp, she asked Arthur to help her quickly as she couldn't hold on any longer. Arthur immediately ran to Teshia, grabbed her weak body, and carried her out of the danger area. On the way out, Arthur continued to monitor and control the plants that were blocking them with the magic of his mana. The magic of his mana enveloped them in a soft glow, protecting them from further harm. Arriving at a safe place, Arthur set Teshia down gently. Anxiously, he looked at Teshia, who looked exhausted. Arthur asked if she was okay. Teshia, still gasping for breath, expressed her resentment at always needing Arthur's help. Arthur gently held both of Teshia's shoulders, calming her down. He explained that this was not Teshia's fault, and that if anyone was to blame, it was the mana beast he gave her. Teshia gave Arthur a stern look and punched him lightly in the chest with her elbow, saying that what Arthur gave her was a chance to grow. Although still exhausted, Teshia tried to smile and her spirits began to recover. She felt that now was the right time to learn how to use her powers and become strong enough to fight by Arthur's side. Teshia extended her hand for a high five with Arthur, who returned Teshia's smile and nodded with confidence. In the distance, Winsome observed the event with a thoughtful look. He felt that it was too early to reveal everything, but one day Teshia would learn more about Lady Sylvie, especially about the truth of her parentage. This scene marks a pivotal moment in Arthur and Teshia's journey, underscoring the strength of their friendship and commitment to each other, as well as hope for a better future. Arthur and Teshia stood facing each other, gazing intently at each other. The peacefulness of the moment was suddenly interrupted by a clearing of the throat from behind. Grandpa Varian appeared before them with a serious expression. Varian's presence broke the calm atmosphere between Arthur and Teshia, making both of them feel a little awkward. Quickly, Arthur tried to divert attention from this uncomfortable situation. Varian, with a big smile, told them that they were going to a safer place. He assured Arthur and Teshia that the place would not be destroyed. They then boarded the elven royal carriage to proceed to the location promised by Varian. Inside the carriage, Daisy fell asleep with Sylvie, a small cat-shaped dragon who also appeared to be asleep on her lap. Varian started the conversation by expressing his regret. He admitted that he had forced Teshia to release the first stage of her beast will, thinking that Tessia was already able to control it as her body was fully integrated. Arthur, who was sitting next to Tessia, thought carefully about the situation. He recalled how the beast will rebelled against Tessia's body and the negative effects of the accelerated integration process. Arthur felt that Tessia's beast will was different from his own. Although the integration had reached the full stage, Tessia's mana was still resisting. Arthur looked at Virion with a serious gaze, emphasizing the importance of being careful to avoid further harm to Tessia and those around her. Virion, feeling offended, replied angrily. He felt pride and admiration for his grandson's struggle, even though it seemed to be a mistake. Virion then took a deep breath to calm himself down. He proposed giving her a seal to suppress Tessia's mana until she gained better control. However, Virion also realized that if anything happened to her, the seal could be very dangerous and difficult to remove in the near future. As an alternative, he suggested administering a protective artifact first. Arthur agreed with Virion's suggestion of a protective artifact and offered to stay by Tessia's side for as long as possible. Virion, with a mischievous smile, had expected Arthur to say that. He continued in a serious tone, asking how Arthur viewed his grandson and whether he planned to marry him one day. Arthur was surprised and worried by the question. He was silent for a moment, his face flushed with worry. After thinking hard, Arthur finally answered hesitantly. He admitted that he liked Tessia, but couldn't be sure if it was just a crush or true love. Arthur hoped to find the answer soon. He was determined to become stronger even before proposing to Virion's granddaughter. Virion smiled with satisfaction at Arthur's answer. He was pleased to hear Arthur's honesty and determination, even though Tessia was a slightly fierce and pampered girl. Virion also noted that Arthur and his grandson had a shared past, which probably strengthened their relationship. Although elven relationships were usually longer, Virion realized that the times were affecting everything. Virion then asked Arthur again if he really liked his grandson. This question left Arthur confused and uneasy, but he finally gave an honest answer. Arthur confirmed that he liked Tessia, but was still unsure whether it was just a crush or true love. He hoped to find the answer soon and was determined to keep trying to be better. Virion, with a proud smile, appreciated Arthur's honesty and determination. He hoped things would work out and looked forward to the next development of the relationship between Arthur and his grandson. Virion smiled proudly at Arthur's reply, impressed by the young man's wisdom. However, when Sylvie woke up and cheerfully mentioned her belief that Arthur liked Tessia, Arthur was distressed. Virion tried to calm the situation by stating that Tessia could sleep peacefully no matter what. However, Virion misjudged Tessia's situation. Tessia was actually just pretending to be asleep and listening to the whole conversation. In her sleep-like state, Tessia felt very depressed. She thought anxiously about how Arthur had just confessed his love for her, while she felt panicked and could not control her breathing and heartbeat. Meanwhile, Virion and Arthur observed Tessia, who seemed to be sweating even while lying down. Virion wondered about the cause of the sweat, and Arthur guessed that Tessia might be having a nightmare. Arthur daydreamed, thinking about how his special care for Tessia showed different feelings. He realized the importance of protecting Tessia with protective artifacts, especially in an increasingly dangerous situation. Arthur also remembered Ellie and his mother's phoenix pendants that could only be used once. With the threat of war possibly coming, as mentioned by Winsome, Arthur felt the need to give Tessia stronger protection. He considered giving her a pet that could protect her at all times. Virion ended Arthur's reverie by telling him that they had arrived at their destination. They got off the carriage and were greeted by King Alduin Iralith and Queen Muriel Iralith. Tessia immediately ran to hug her parents with joy, while Arthur asked about their location. King Alduin greeted Arthur kindly, expressing his happiness at seeing Arthur again. Queen Muriel also expressed her gratitude for Arthur's help. However, Queen Muriel then asked about the reason behind the diversion of their journey home and the news of their house being under construction. King Alduin joked about possible damage to their home, causing the three to feel anxious and break out in a cold sweat. Varian tried to calm the situation by explaining that he was training with Tessia and accidentally damaged part of their house. Arthur was cynical about Varian's explanation, but he was eventually forced to agree. Varian casually stated that the damage could be repaired quickly and that they had lost time to visit Rinya. Tessia was happy to see Rinya's grandmother after so long and asked how Rinya was doing. Varian explained that Rinya was very busy and showed interest in Arthur's future. Arthur wondered why Rinya's grandmother was interested in his future and did not remember this place since her last visit. Queen Muriel explained that Rinya had secluded herself on the edge of the kingdom and did not reveal why. With this information, they continued their journey to the mentioned place. Varian reminded them to remain vigilant at all times, while Arthur wondered why Varian was being so protective. In the middle of a lush and peaceful forest, the group consisting of Arthur Lewin, Tessia Erelith, Sylvie, King Alduin Erelith, Queen Muriel Erelith, and Varian stepped quietly among the green trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating soft patterns of light on the path. Sylvie, with her charming figure, was running around happily, chasing something between the trees. Suddenly, Sylvie stops and shows us her small quarry, a small bird that she catches with great pride. Enthusiastically, she showed her prey to the group. King Alduin, who was walking beside Arthur, smiled at Sylvie's happiness. He observed with interest how much Sylvie enjoyed hunting and felt the need to ensure that she did not get too excited. Arthur, who was walking next to King Alduin, smiled and nodded, responding with pride to Sylvie's excitement. He recognized that Sylvie was always cheerful in her every action. Then, King Alduin turned his attention to Arthur with a curious tone. He asked about the bond between Arthur and Sylvie, asking what made their relationship so strong. Arthur looked at Alduin gently and explained that he felt very connected to Sylvie, and they also protect each other. King Alduin nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation, and expressed his gratitude that Arthur had taken such good care of his daughter. He expressed his appreciation for Arthur being there for Tessia, even in dangerous situations. Arthur replied in a respectful tone, stating that Tessia often helped him as well. He explained how Tessia helped keep his composure and kept him focused. King Alduin laughed lightly, looking at Arthur with a meaningful expression. He acknowledged that Arthur did not look like a 13-year-old and found it difficult to think of him as a boy his own age. He revealed that Arthur's maturity was impressive. Arthur was honored by the compliment and thanked King Alduin for his kind words. King Alduin then cleared his throat and continued in a more serious tone, reminding Arthur that he was speaking as a father. Knowing that his daughter had someone as reliable as Arthur was invaluable. Arthur bowed his head appreciatively and promised to continue to strive to be someone worthy of Tessia. He expressed his gratitude for King Alduin's trust. With the peaceful atmosphere of the forest surrounding them, and Sylvie remaining cheerful all around, the group continued their journey with deep mutual respect and understanding. Arthur stood beside Alduin Erelith, gazing around while trying to calm his mind. In the distance, Varian, Muriel, and Tessia had walked ahead, leaving the two of them to continue their conversation. Alduin looked at Arthur with a serious gaze, then began to speak in a heavy voice. Alduin revealed that no parent would want their child to grow up faster than they should, or to bear the burden of an adult. He expressed a deep sense of exhaustion and sadness due to his experiences over the 30 years since his youth ended. Arthur, curious, asked Alduin what he meant by his statement. Alduin explained that his views on the human race had been greatly affected by tragic events in the past, including the death of his mother and the near loss of his daughter due to the actions of slave traders. Arthur listened attentively, sensing the depth of grief and anger Alduin was experiencing. Alduin went on to recount how a human boy, none other than Arthur, managed to bring Tessia home safely. In addition to saving Tessia, Arthur also dared to scold the careless elven king, something Alduin had never imagined. The conversation reveals the complexity of their relationship and underlines the importance of understanding and respecting each other in the face of challenges. Amidst the peaceful forest, this conversation adds depth to the growing relationship between Arthur and the Erelith family. Meanwhile, Tessia gazed with admiration at the soft green leaf in her hand. The leaf looked like a natural tapestry with its bright green color and fine veins, glistening in the sunlight. In this moment of tranquility, Tessia felt a rare sense of peace, as if the whole world around her had stopped for a moment. However, the tranquility was shattered when a faint sound came from the bushes near them. The scraping sound of leaves and twigs breaking made the whole group awake from their awe and ready for a possible threat. Arthur, readying his weapon, shouted in a tone full of tension, identifying the threat as a monster. Varian immediately stepped forward, covering Arthur with his body and preparing for danger. He emphasized not to attack before confirming the true threat. The bushes finally opened, and from within emerged an old woman with a simple appearance but full of wisdom. Renia, with lustrous silver hair and a face full of maturity, stepped out quietly. Her aura was completely different from the monster Arthur had imagined. Renia looked at them angrily and sternly, condemning their actions in readiness to attack the old woman. Tessia was relieved to see a familiar figure and immediately embraced Renia lovingly, expressing her happiness to see her again. Renia returned Tessia's hug gently, her eyes full of affection, expressing how happy she was to be reunited with her granddaughter. Varian, who was still protecting Arthur, commented on the situation in a serious tone, reminding them that they should have met at the entrance. Renia explained that if they had arrived sooner, they might have gotten further lost, and she was just making sure they did not lose their way. Renia then pinched Arthur's cheek affectionately, complimenting him on how he had grown into a handsome young man and joking about capturing his heart if he were younger. Arthur, feeling awkward, jokingly replied about his fear of Renia's monster-like appearance. Renia then turned to Varian, asking him about his past beauty. Muriel Erelith also added nostalgically, reminding how many girls had envied Renia in the past. Varian, having just finished mocking, made a snide comment about it, to which Renia replied in a sarcastic yet understanding tone. Renia understood how Varian felt and acknowledged the mistake of being a little insensitive. Varian replied softly, apologizing if necessary. Renia reminded them that they were almost there and that they should leave soon. As they continued on their way, they came to an area surrounded by a waterfall-like landscape, and Renia warned them not to speak and not to let out any light. They entered a dark and narrow passage, feeling a deep sense of tension and curiosity. Soon, they came to a large door, and Renia, with her knowledge and experience, predicted that they should enter through it. Arthur, though still confused, followed their lead with curiosity and expectation of what they would encounter next.